Morena, everybody. Ooh, that's quite impactful, wasn't it? That's good. I can do that at home, can't I? Good morning, everybody. Ngā mihi o te ahura kia koutou tēnei, ki te whakanui i te kaupapa-nui, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to see kind of a bit of a full house today. So welcome to the Environment Committee. I'm the Chair, Councillor Penny Gaylor, representing the Kapiti Coast. And good to see everybody. I hope everybody's having a good morning. So I just want to begin our meeting with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te a kaukura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora. Thank you. So we have our agenda for the day. We'll first go to apologies. We have none, but then I don't see Councillor Ropata. Okay.
And excuse me, Madam Chair, I have to leave the meeting at 10 and will join when I can.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So somebody want to move those apologies? Councillor Saw, Councillor Cookman second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Motion carried. Thank you. Anybody want to declare a conflict of interest? Good. And now we'll move on to public participation. So we have two separate public participations this morning, and I'll invite them up to the table there, and we have a microphone there, and Councillor Ponta can assist you if you need any help with the on and off situation, the red light. We need you to have the red light on because, of course, anybody online can't hear you if the microphone's not working. So the first speakers are a group, so they have 10 minutes to speak, and then if there are any questions from the committee, there's a 5-minute opportunity there. Then we have an individual speaking. As an individual, you then get 5 minutes to speak, and then if there are any questions, 5 minutes for questions. Given it's always good to make sure with public participation we stick to our time frame, because we have an agenda that goes on for kind of another 6 items rather, and then we have a workshop. So a bell goes a minute before your time is up. So if I could please invite Papataio, Chris, and is going to come up for our first for the group. Yeah. Welcome. Feel free to adjust the microphone, move it around, or whatever you'd like to do. So, Morena, welcome. Thank you for coming. Morena.
Kia ora, ko Chris Montgomery tōku ingoa. I'm the team leader in Enviro Schools here at Greater Wellington, and I'm just really pleased to invite the Papataio Earth Care team to come and talk to you today. These wonderful students are supported by Wairere Penny in Porirua, who's sitting at the back here, and she's alongside Renee Davis, who's another educator, and Marty, who's the founder of Papataio. And they run training programs that help develop practical skills and around working with te taiao, and also encouraging innovation and future work in this area. And Greater Wellington's work with Papataio has sort of been in regional environmental education groups, and also more recently there's been through student action grants, we've been able to, a couple of years ago, help with native planting at Wellington High School, and this group's going to be talking about a more recent project that we've done. So I'm just going to hand over to Ahuriri, Anahira, Akila and Nahuia to tell us more about their project.
Tēnā koutou, o te stā tēnā mō rā tātou katoa. First and foremost, from behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you to you all for supporting and funding our project that we're here to share with you all today. Introduction-wise, kia ora, wahuriri te tana ahau, no te kura Māori o Porirua, and I am part of a team of young rangatahi, part of this Taiohi Taiao program, where we've come together to basically share our experiences with this program and what we've been able to accomplish this year. And without further ado, I would like to pass the baton over to my teammates. So thank you.
So we have started a mural to spread awareness to the polluted harbour in Porirua. We started this in term 1. We started planning on what we're going to do, which was just an issue and how we're going to spread the issue. Term 2, we started planning properly on groups, designs and everything, and that carried all the way out through term 2. Term 3, we actually started the mural and we painted on a piece of plywood the harbour, what it could look like, but we didn't paint the polluted version. And
So basically, the whole idea of our mural was to spread awareness to our local waters around the Porirua Harbour, as it's seen many decays throughout the years. And from the artistic side, we want to spread that with the form of art, especially with toi Māori and sharing their experiences as Māori rangatahi, because we are the next generation. And yeah, so moving on.
Kia ora koutou, ko ngā hui tōku ingoa no Ngāti Parairo Kātāu, and I'm from Tower College. So I am the artistic side of our group, and I've created our mural piece. I've developed 2 designs and I've decided to merge it all together, and this is our piece for what we have been doing for the last year, for this term. Basically, this is just showing what our Porirua Harbour used to look like and what we want it to look like right now. And it just basically shows all the Māori of the Ngāti Toa and Porirua Harbour.
Yeah. So one of the main components for our piece was revolving around Awarua, the taniwha who used to live around the Porirua Harbour, who laid to rest on Mana Island. And with that, we have stories that we've created to resemble that piece. So we have 2 sides, Pa Māori and English, 2 different reviews about our harbour itself.
Hi, my name's Anahira. I come from Mana College and I'd written a short story on behalf of our mural, as that's how I planned on contributing to my group. It starts off with Te Awarua o Porirua has a significant standing in Ngāti Toa history. They had once harvested their food from the waters where fish had been healthy and plentiful. The people had been taught in the ways of fishing for the purpose of providing for themselves and their iwi. The harbour has such a significant standing in Māori culture in both a literal and spiritual sense. However, as Aotearoa becomes more and more industrialised, the state of our water only continues to decrease. We as kaitiaki can no longer harvest from the waters as we once could. We as kaitiaki cannot even dream of swimming when we're merely shuffling amongst the garbage floating in disarray. I wanted my writing to connect to the past, on what our connection was to the waters back then in contrast to how it is now in modern times. And I wanted to highlight that because that felt really important to me.
Karitiki te kōpara e kōnei I te Porirua. Mana whakaiti, mana whakaaro nui, mana whakaaro pai. E ko Awarua e. Ko te iti ko te rahi, te whakakotahi o te motu, o ngā wairi poripo te iwi. E ko Awarua e. Ko e nei te aro o te ao hau, te manaaki o te mātauranga o mātou tipuna, hoki atu ki ngā wā o Awarua e noho ana hei kaitiaki o ngā kōpara wai huri noa i te motu. Mawīwi tangata, mawīwi whenua. Kia ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata.
So this artistic side is talking about the story of Awarua and how we express him in our piece. And that expression is the Māori side of our community. And yeah. So part of our aspirations for this project was quite difficult to figure out. We are a diverse group, relatively from a bunch of different kura, and the fact that we managed to come together and figure out straight then what we wanted to talk about, and that was our waters. That was one of our big inspirations, leading back to like our environments in Te Ao Māori, and yeah.
We are all connected in a way to our harbour. There's some of us that do wakaama, which means we practice in the harbour, or some of us even just drive past it. This is a really important issue to us because we have felt the disgust of the water as it itches on your skin when you walk out, as it itches on your legs and your feet as you put the waka away. We don't want to feel like this anymore, and we don't want our taina to feel like this. We don't want the generations after us to feel like this. Even for the people that don't paddle, why would we want one of the biggest things right in the middle of our city to be made fun of? Why would we want the water to be made fun of because of how it smells and how it's polluted and how dirty it is? We want to spread awareness, and we hope that people in Porirua or all over Wellington, maybe even all over the country, can help us out to make clean waters and to spread more awareness about any other dirty waters that we have in New Zealand.
A lot of this has to start with us as rangatahi and having support with rangatahi throughout the motu. A lot of this comes from like the higher ups, because us as rangatahi alone, we can't really do this without that help. We have each other, but I feel like we need more. And yeah, that comes from all of us.
I just want to say thank you so much for letting us come here and voicing our voices. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, actually. The bigger thanks is coming back from us to you, and I'm sure on behalf of everybody, applaud the work you're doing, and as all of us represent constituencies where we're pretty well connected to the young people in schools in our own communities. And I know that it's very uplifting for us when we're worrying about the impact that we're having. You know, it's so uplifting to see that how committed you are, and thank you for the voice that you take to your peers. So thank you. And I've got questions, Councillor Saw.
Ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you so much for speaking so passionately and knowledgeably about Te Awarua o Porirua. We hear a lot from other groups, but to hear from rangatahi is really super powerful. And also want you to know that other rangatahi around the region come and speak on behalf of their awa as well. So we hear you and see you and absolutely want to support the mahi and the aspirations that you have. I heard your call for wanting help, and I was wondering what help might look like to you. Is it being involved in things like coming to councils and making submissions and taking those sorts of actions? Because you have your pūrako, you've had the mahi toi there with your mural. Just curious to know what some of those steps are and how we can help you do that.
I mean, I feel like because we're capable in a lot of we do, and we have had help with like the mayor and some people on the council in Porirua, but it's just taking that next step into bringing up those factors so that it's expanded. And I feel like as a team, probably the best thing for us is to just speak up and yeah. Thanks.
Okay, here's my other question. Would you ever like any of us to come along to when you meet and you guys can show us what it is you want to do over time rather than in this formal environment? So please invite us and we'll come and have a chat to you guys where you guys are rather than having to come to this scary, daunting place. How about that?
That's amazing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Connolly.
I may have missed it at the beginning, but where do we find this mural?
So, we've had a hard time on figuring out where to stand it up, but we want to stand it up by the Wakaama shed on the Ngāti Toa side, which is by Whitirea Polytech, in case anyone is unclear. But I feel like a lot of people, it's right next to the harbour, and a lot of people drive past it. But yeah, that's just where we want to put it.
So it's not actually in place at the moment?
No, we still need permission, and we've only sort of just finished it. But yeah.
Anything we can do to help with getting it up, like we will totally be supportive. That's the kind of practical thing that we might be able to help with.
Darren can write a letter.
Yeah, Darren can write a letter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, because a lot of our asking has been towards the Porirua Council, but we've just had a really hard time getting like that mostly sorted out. Most of that's been with Wairere. Most of that whole other part with the communal side has been mostly on the admin part, but
also, just you've got obviously a visual of what it looks like. Would you be able to send that to our council officers so we can see it and promote it? That would be awesome.
yes.
And one more question from Councillor Crispin.
Thank you. My comments are more about thanks to you for the work you're doing. I've lived on the inlet there for 47 years on the Pātanui arm, and every month we get questions about the 5 rivers that come into the Pātanui and Onipoto inlet there. The highest levels of pollution are on the Lawa website, are those ones by the Porua stream, which is just opposite your Waka area and that. And so I really appreciate and value the work you're doing. So thank you.
Right, so that's all the questions from the table. Thank you so much for coming in. Wonderful to have met. And as Councillor Saw said, we love invitations. So, we'd love to be involved. Hearing that we'd be keen to give some support. So just, do reach out and ask if you need some help. I have to say that up in the Kapiti Coast, we have had put up young people have done a lot of murals up there and put them around different public places for different kinds of messages, including environmental messages. And I'm very heartened to say that those murals have been really well respected by our community and not been damaged in any way. So I want to give you that kind of encouragement that this may even be the beginning of other pieces of art around your community. So well done and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so the next public participant is Renee Hogg.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I've got my...
Please feel free to bring a chair if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah. Have I got clicker for that? Am I in charge of the screen behind you? Not working.
blow that up. I've just got my phone on, not to answer, so I'll just go quickly in the interest of time because there's a bit to kind of cover off here. But thanks for letting me come in this morning. And I just wanted to come in just so I'm really disappointed with the interactions I've had with the land management team. My property boundaries are a reserve, which is a local purposes reserve for the purpose of soil conservation and river control, as you can see up there. And we've got a bit of an issue happening on the boundary and some dissent or disagreement, I guess, with how and what's caused that. So from my perspective, from my property, that area, so 2.6461 hectares is land I've bought. It's got a mortgage on it, and it's the size of the area that I'm charged rates on. I'm pretty old school in my world. A boundary fence means something to me. And as you can see from here, the title, property title, and the rates are all tied into that. So I think it's really important that we keep the integrity of these boundary fences. And the other thing for me is if you break it, you fix it. So how do we manage it when we've got challenges coming through? So the stance GW have taken on this is that they're not obligated because of the RMA to do any work or manage any of the issues that they've created. It's pretty hard kind of a stance to take because actually I'm not obligated either. So if we both take that stance, we've got a boundary fence hanging in the air and nobody does anything. So I think it's a pretty kind of a moot point. You're going to look through some photos in a minute. We're going to whiz through, but I'd really challenge that this is a natural process, and I'd also challenge that due care has been taken in this situation. So this is my land, this is the property, this is the reserve. So those trees are hard against the fence. These are all pest trees. So hawthorn trees are on GW's list of pest trees. Those big creek willows in behind, also pest trees, and those wild plum trees aren't on anybody's list, but they're also just pest trees. There's been no maintenance, no repair, no conversation with me at any time to suggest that there was any risk to my property from this reserve. And we've got to the point that the issues have happened and all these things have bubbled up. So from my house looking forward, that's my land. I can't do anything to prevent anything coming under the fence. I manage that as well as I can. That land is productive land for me, and it's not a riparian area, and it's land I've brought and paid a mortgage on. We're just going to whiz through the photos. You're very welcome to pick these up, but this is some of the challenges that are occurring. I just want to focus on this a little bit. That's just bare soil, what you'll see, and that's clay. So I hope you're all aware of what clay and water does, but it just melts. So you can see those big clay banks there. That was a plum tree, so one of the plum trees that fell over. My perspective of this is this was a tree that fell over in a storm, not a natural process of erosion. That's clearly got that bank tied up in that tree's roots, and you can see where that's pulled through the fence and left a scar. This is the leftovers of that. You can imagine, you can see the stream's not anywhere near that bank. It's not anywhere near that bank till it's in full flood, and we'll see that in a minute. This is plum tree 2, which was left as a stump. That stump's now fallen away and also left that fence hanging in the air. What you can see there is bare soil and covered soil on each side of it. This is the stream full flood. So well, it's not full flood, that was an August rain event this year, so we haven't even had a flood, but you can see how high that runs and just where that sits on that bank. And there's an example of where the trees were and the soil's been left. So there's the water's rushed around the tree, it's gouged out that hole, it's left that scar of bare land, and you can see the grassy bank. So that's clay bank. When the water rises as it is, all that does is just melt that bank. So the solution that was put to me, that's an aerial view. You can see the trees have been removed. The only spots that have impacted that fence are where the willow tree was, where the plum tree was that fell, and where the other plum tree that was that fell. The solution that was put to me was a circa 25k solution. And when I went back to them and said, I don't have the cash to put in $12,360 at the minute, I don't want to give up $10,000 on my land, and I don't have the time and the resource to continue maintaining a 145 metre bank of new plantings.
Yes, they'll move there for, is it 1 minute? Is it?
Just, yeah, we're nearly at the end. If I can just finish this, to me that was a massive overstep. A third of that $12,360 was a consent of $4,700. So as a neighbouring landowner, I have to pay consent to GW for a reserve that's impacting my property. I think there's a real conflict of interest there. I can't find any case or anywhere that's put a neighbour to a reserve having to pay the regional council consent to fix their land. And I guess you can tell, really angry about it. It's not a solution in any way, shape or form. So GW's portion of that was $6,460. That wasn't cash. So my portion's cash. That's your team doing that work and a little bit of post and steel wire. So why would I do that? One, I can't commit to the funds. Two, I won't commit to losing $10,000 of land to turn it into a riparian strip when it's not a riparian strip. You can clearly see the bank that's left around where those cutout marks have been made. There's plenty of bank there without having to take a 5 metre and stretch my bank. And I think you can all clearly see that there's no erosion happening where it hasn't happened around the trees. So the trees have been removed, the bare soil's been left. When that stream rises, the water hits a clay bank and melts it. And that's created the drop-offs coming under the fence. So the team apparently weren't surprised that I wasn't happy about that as a solution. I think it's appalling that members of the land management team have been able to email themselves. I've been told I'm a source of ongoing problems by that team. When you look at this picture here, my land on the left, I don't believe my land and I are the source of ongoing problems in this. The stream is the problem, the challenges that's coming under the fence, and there could have been a much more constructive approach to managing this. There's a very clear erosion and accretion guideline. If that happens, if we do believe this is erosion and you are going to move a boundary fence, it needs to be resurveyed. My property needs a new size, and the rates and everything need to be appropriately managed around that. There's no point moving a boundary fence into my property and then charging me rates on that full size fence. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Any questions to me, you're more than welcome to come and see that ongoing damage, what it's doing, and the impact that's having to me. I may be one landowner, but for all, that might be a small reserve for you, but for all of us, there's 4 or 5 of us landowners around that reserve. That's a $25,000 project to just one of us. So I'd really like to see that reserve managed centrally as a reserve. The $10,000 fencing, that's just my stretch of fence. If that was the whole reserve fence, we wouldn't be getting the lifestyle tax on it, and we certainly wouldn't be getting the consent, the $5,000 consent to have to work that. When you've got 5 landowners putting in a $5,000 consent, that's a significant ticket clip that GW's taking as well, when we're not doing anything to create it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Renee. I'll just ask for if anybody's got any questions.
I'd just like to say thank you for coming in.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Yes, do we have a copy? And we'll make it available for all the councillors. Thank you. So now we move on to item number 4, minutes from the previous meeting. Anybody got anything they want to raise about those? In that case, I'll have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Nash moved, Councillor Ponta second. Any debate? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. So the next item is item number 5, predator-free Wellington update. So James is in the house. Welcome. Come on board. Please sit. Relax. Adjust the chair to whatever suits, and then you can move the microphone forward. So, and the time allocated for this was no, there's cool. Okay, so I imagine you'll probably want to do your update, and then I'll call for questions. Otherwise, we kind of get a bit higgledy-piggledy. So we'll do it like that. Thank you.
Sounds great. So I understand I've got 30 minutes. Is that right, Chair? 30 minutes, was it? Okay. Sure. Kia ora tātou. Thank you, councillors and officers, for the opportunity to come in and give you an update on predator-free Wellington. There's always a lot to cover in this incredibly positive space, so I will move at pace to try and allow for plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, when I last came and presented to you all a little over a year ago, we still had a little bit of cleanup work left on Miramar Peninsula, and here we are a year and a bit on, and I think the biggest prize of all of this for us is being able to hold that peninsula at zero for an entire year. So that doesn't mean that things haven't got back on. They have, but we've been able to shut those down very, very quickly. As of this moment, the last piece of any evidence that we've had of any of our target species on Miramar was a dead Norway rat that turned up 6 weeks ago by the Burger King, reported by a member of public. So it's pretty phenomenal effort, right? I think that's incredible. In order to keep Miramar safe, we have employed what we call the Swiss cheese method. So multiple layers of Swiss cheese, if you can imagine that. Each one has a hole in it, right? There's nothing that is 100%, and it starts with community vigilance. So building capability at a community level and enabling incredibly fast reporting has been really key for us. We've now switched to a service provider, so we're aiming to be better than your telco, better than your internet company. We get notified of a potential sighting or evidence, we will be there within 24 hours, and that's helped build real confidence in our system. It's also proven a genuine exit strategy, right? We've given Miramar back to the people and been able to deploy our resource into phase 2, which is incredible. And that's what sets this apart from a lot of conservation projects. There's a genuine exit strategy, right? We don't want to be here forever. We've also got a team of highly specialised volunteers which have been absolutely phenomenal. So these aren't just going around checking traps or bait stations. They're identifying various detections on chews or looking at our camera data, or highly specialised jobs, and seeing that call to action being answered in the public domain has been absolutely phenomenal. So pretty amazing what we're seeing there. And we've got our full-time detection dog running circuits, but I guess the point being, speed is absolutely critical for us. Nothing is infallible, but having that result a year on is incredible. So we're pretty wrapped with Miramar. So that's where we were a year ago, and now we are obviously heading into our second phase. Oops, that's all gone out a little bit out of order. I'll talk about this as well. So we've got some of the other work that we do which is distinguishing us, is building these additional layers of confidence, right? So our game now is to reduce the defence costs. So how do we reduce that cost model associated with defending an area? And one of the things we've been looking at is the genomic sequencing of ship rats. And so we had 158 rats collected from Miramar and around the city. And what we're trying to do is build a genomic profile of a Miramar rat. What that told us is that actually we can distinguish a Miramar rat from a rat anywhere else. And that's key, because when you're hunting every single animal, you want to know if something turns up. Is it source population? You know, are we chasing a family? Has it come from somewhere else? If it's come from somewhere else, where is it and how can we deal with that at source? So pretty amazing research findings as part of that. And as we continue to build throughout the city, throughout the region, hopefully we can just continue building that database and being able to track these individuals down, because that's the key risk, right? We don't have fences everywhere. We've got vehicles coming in and out, and being able to determine where things have come from at source by their genomic profile has been pretty huge for us. Now that we've got our proof of concept, so Miramar's done, there's really one thing that we need to be doing, and that is going harder and faster. So optimization is key for us as a team, right? We've got to reduce the price point for what we're doing, and already we're at 75% less cost per hectare to eliminate our target species than we were in Miramar. It's not surprising, right? If you think of the first human genomic sequence, that was, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now it's a few hundred. But that proof of concept into now, how do we go faster? How do we go more cheaply? Labor's about 92% of our budget. So that's really the key for us. And we've already got through 308 hectares of phase 2, and that includes some of the gnarliest terrain that we're going to see. So if you look up at that map there, you can see areas like Evans Bay Parade, where you've got those steep escarpments coming straight up, you've got roads underneath, ideal rat habitat. And so that's been pretty hard to get through that, but that is some of the most difficult terrain, difficult habitat we're going to find. And you consider an area like Hataitai, and for any of you that live in Hataitai, I used to be a resident of Hataitai, that one suburb we're getting over 300 bait station interactions in one fortnight. So that's the scale of what we're seeing, that's the scale at which we're having to work. Hataitai is now largely shut down. We've managed to get ahead of that, it's got to 0, and we've moved on. I just want to take the opportunity to tautoko our team, in particular John, the team that he leads of GW staff, because the leadership and commitment that we're seeing in that space and the dedication to continuous improvement is absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, tautoko John and to the rest of the team. Another part of the equation for us in looking at a cost model is this concept of optimizing the power of volunteers. And I don't want to trivialize it, because the effort that people put into this is absolutely huge. But we are seeing this genuine demand to want to learn more, to specialize more, to become more technically proficient. And so some of our volunteers, dare I say it, would be at a level of technical proficiency far greater than I ever was as a dock ranger. It's absolutely phenomenal what we're seeing, and that commitment. So that picture that you're seeing on that slide is our 7-kilometre buffer and barrier system, and that's entirely led, operated by volunteers, 123 of them out there manning some 1,000, 1,200 bait stations and traps every second week to try and stop any ingress into our phase 2 area. We've also got our, we call them the biosecurity flying squad on Miramar. They're out there looking at the cameras, they're out there picking up on any potential evidence reported in by the public. And then more broadly, of course, we've got around 2,000 households doing backyard trapping, and that number is actually probably far more, but that's 2,000 individuals, 10,000 households. So a very conservative estimate on that is around 55,000 hours of contribution directly to predator-free Wellington activities. That's excluding reserve trapping, excluding all other conservation. I think that's phenomenal. I think it speaks to a really high level of mandate and support from the public, and a commitment by Wellingtonians to get this done. What we're also seeing is this phenomenal movement from Wellington and beyond, and some of the people in this room are instrumental in leading that, and huge support from regional council. But we're now starting to see this coalescence around predator-free groups that have sprung up out of Porirua into Whitby, down on the Kapiti coast where I'm now living. And so this concept around building capability in that space has been huge for us. It continues to be a focus and something where we can make a real difference. As well as the coordination as individual groups spring up, there's this idea of how do we coalesce around a larger area? How can we deliver on some shared goals? And so I'm working quite a lot in that space. I'm working with the likes of Kapiti Coast District Council, who are now looking to resource a biosecurity role that can provide some of that coalescence around this work, and also bringing together groups up the Kapiti Coast. So we've just started up predator-free Te Horo Beach, predator-free Peka Peka, predator-free Waikanai. There's also a strategic significance to this area of work. We think in Wellington, we don't have any ferrets, but we know that through Transmission Gully, the Kapiti Expressway, proliferation of rabbits along those boundaries and the danger that represents. So we've now got a trap line going along the Kapiti Coast and into Transmission Gully, and tautoko your work there, Darren, to shine a light on that issue. So it's not just because it's something that people want to do, it's strategically significant for the region, and it's the right thing to be doing. Part of my role is also to look at this from a national lens. What would a national rollout of a PF 2050 strategy look like? And a fairly obvious place to start is at the bottom of the North Island and the bottom of the South Island. So we are starting to see quite a cool, clear pathway up and out of the city, and that's extending right across the region. So pretty phenomenal there. There's always more that we can be doing in that space, but a good example of building capability is we've got a young man who's one of the leaders from Predator Free Porirua. He's embedded in our team now. He's going out with the team and doing the work that's building his capability. He will then take back to his group. A lot of workshops that we're running around, the use of tools, how we put them out, how we service them. That's trying to really put on hyperdrive the hard learning that we had to do over the last 7 years, and then invest that in other groups so they don't have the same heartache and pain and can actually optimize what they're doing at place quite quickly. So there's more that we can do in that space. I think, looking at the role of regional council and others funding predator-free groups, there's an opportunity to coalesce around formalising capability building in that space, coming and spending some time with our team, seeing what we do, seeing how we use tools, seeing how we run detection, and we'd totally be up for that. I think that's a no-brainer. Another part to the equation for us in this journey of optimization is the role of technology. And so we're at the leading, or some may say the bleeding edge of this sometimes, because things don't always go according to plan. But what you're seeing up there in that image, the top one is called an H2O bait station. So that uses hydrogen cell technology to pump out the active toxin brotificum over a period of time. So when that's fully up and underway, that can sit in the bush for up to a month. And so the labour offset for that is quite considerable when you think when we're going through a knockdown phase, we're servicing things every single week. When we're going through a mop-up phase, we might move to every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but to have something that can sit out there and do the job as effectively as needing to have people out there the whole time is pretty impressive. So it is early days, and we are the only project being able to trial this in an urban setting, and that's under a research licence with MPI and EPA. And it's via our partners at Zero Invasive Predators. They've also got them deployed down in South Westland. So these are the only 2 places in the country where we're trying to figure out, can we use technology to go harder and faster? Another one of their tools, which is just below the bait station, is called a zip-in. And that uses technology to target animals. So a rat or a stoat will go into the trap. It triggers a plate in the middle, so there's no chance for failure rate. A lot of other traps animals can recoil out of. But this one, it seals it very quickly, and then the chamber fills with CO2 to asphyxiate the animal. So that's at the required animal welfare standards. And then it's also paired with automated reporting, so we will get notified remotely if something's turned up in the trap, and we can go and check that out. So those are just a couple of the things that we are trialling in this innovation space. And it is a world away, right, from where we started a few years ago. This is the technology we need to bring to bear to achieve this across the country, and it's pretty pleasing, pretty proud to be at the leading edge of that space. So of course that all sounds really rosy, but life's not all a box of chocolates, as the common phraseology goes. We have some challenges in the national picture. In fact, as an organisation, our one major challenge in terms of maintaining momentum is around funding. And that is because the national picture has changed. So PF 2050 Limited, which is the government company set up to fund landscape scale projects such as Predator Free Wellington, has had quite a significant drop in its available funding. So driven through Jobs for Nature, driven through the end of Provincial Growth Fund, but their operating budget's gone from about $35 million last year to $11 million in 2025-26. So we've got some challenges coming up. Their contribution to Predator Free Wellington has been in the order of $2 million a year out of a total operating budget of $4 million. And so that's set to drop. So they're still wanting to keep us on board. They had a suite of 18 landscape scale projects they are funding throughout the country. We're one of only 5 that will be receiving ongoing funding or new funding. So that's leaving us with a $1.5 million hole in our budget if we hold everything constant from calendar year 2026. So it's not sounding an alarm, and it's not expecting anyone to fix this for us. It is just saying, in the interest of good relationship management, in the interest of being a good partner, flagging that we've got some potential issues coming up. We also feel like within this national context, the rollout to 2050 is not a lot of time. And we don't believe this is the time to take our foot off the gas pedal. We have too much to lose. We're partway through a rollout here when we're not running trials. And so, we've got a lot of work to do to raise this issue through the national level. The funding that we are getting from PF 2050, they are wanting to really orientate it towards research and development, and that will be trialling new tools like a toxin called nabormide. Nabormide is a rat-specific toxin. It doesn't affect anything else. So there's some pretty amazing opportunities in that as well. But that's the orientation of where they want the funding to prove some of the questions that need to be answered to inform a national business case, I guess, to government, and then have a rollout from 2030 to 2050. That would require 1 million hectares per year to hit that 2050 goal. But what we're saying is waiting around, holding on till 2030 is not the right way when we're partway through this. Holding a line for us would involve considerable risks. If we don't keep moving forward, then things will keep moving back in. So that is our biggest challenge. Also just wanted to draw your attention to that photo. That photo is of a kakariki in the middle of Strathmore Park, the highest socioeconomic deprivation scores in our city. That's what we are starting to see, which is pretty cool. Of course, we're not sitting down and throwing our hands in the air and saying, we've got this funding hole coming up. What are we going to do? Please help us, please help us. I've always worked on the premise that when somebody gives you some money, we did well out of Jobs for Nature, that your immediate next task is to start looking again. So, we've employed or recruited a new partnerships and philanthropy manager a little over a year ago to help us with that endeavour. So we've also had a number of recent board appointees, so new directors to the board of Predator-Free Wellington. One's Justin Lester and another one is Bridget Abernathy, who's the CEO of the Consumer Energy Index, I think, something like that. And we've got a new chair on board, Tim Pankhurst, who was the previous editor of the Don Post and CEO for New Zealand Seafood. So trying to bring to bear some incredibly well-connected locals that can help us in that space. We've also developed a new approach, if you like, under the board to specifically look into this fundraising space. A key element for us is re-engaging this national government around it. This vision was set up under a national government with John Key, and we're trying to get it back on the agenda. I think we're seeing more broadly less appetite in the environmental realm. And so we are currently engaging with environment select committees from all political parties. In fact, after this meeting, I've got to go up to Parliament and meet with the National Select Committee members. That's really around raising awareness and saying, hey, we've got a lot of cool stuff underway. We don't want to see the wind being taken out of the sails. We've got to keep this moving. That's going to be a little bit more of a slow burn, I think, if we all understand the wheels of politics. Nevertheless, I think we've got a really key role in exposing that, trying to bring the enthusiasm and passion back to this concept of a predator-free Aotearoa in the political realm. We're also looking at corporate sponsorship, and that photo up there is our recent partnership announced with Wellington Airport, so they've come on board as a funder. Also a key opportunity for us to tell stories at place when you consider all the visitors coming into our fine city, understanding that where they're turning up, it is different, and it's something to be proud of, and therefore we do things differently here as well. We're also looking at a more broad fundraising campaign in the public domain. We do incredibly well out of Wellington and Wellingtonians already. It's not in dollars, but it's in blood, sweat and tears, right? So we need to be careful how we orientate that. And we're also looking at high net worth individuals. So, in this city, there's a relatively small pool, but we are working through, a list of names and having some fairly good conversations. But look, everyone else running projects in similar in a voluntary capacity or in the community capacity are going to be doing the same thing. But we've got some pretty smart people on board to help us with that. Also had some really great new in-kind partnerships. One is Russell McVeigh, so that's providing up to $200,000 of legal support a year. Hopefully we don't need $200,000 of legal support because something would have gone wrong if we do. But our mates at Fix and Fog supplying us peanut butter, which is going out to regional groups now. Those kind of things actually really make the difference and help build this whole idea of commitment and shared journey. So I think that's pretty key for us as well. So yes, we are out there trying to fundraise to fill that hole. We're also looking at how we deploy new technologies to lessen the labour burden, and also optimising the role of volunteers in community. And then for someone like me, I've got to be thinking about contingency planning. What does it look like if we can't fill holes? What does it look like over time? Can we hold a line? So we do have some challenges, but we are incredibly well placed. We have achieved some amazing things through our partners, through yourselves, through the community of the city, and to see that spreading far more broadly across the region is absolutely huge. So yeah, we've got some issues on the horizon, but we will be fighting hard. All right, that's the predator-free Wellington whistle stop tour.
Excellent, thank you. I've got a lineup of questions and
Sure.
myself after that. So Councillor Wolf, then Barbie.
Firstly, a huge thank you. And personally, I've experienced some of your work firsthand and in the last week with the doctoral colony at the airport. How amazing is that?
Yeah.
My question is, the domestic threats, like cats in particular, and what's happening with some of the control or lack of control with dogs. Also,
Sure.
what work is being done in that space to advocate for more legislation, really?
So we work very, very closely with the PFNZ Trust. So they're a national advocacy and education group, and it's run by their CEO is Jessie Morgan, so Gareth Morgan's daughter. So they've taken up the cat issue quite strongly, and so we feed into that. Obviously, cats aren't one of our target species, but we advocate really strongly for responsible pet ownership. You'll see the movements like Predator Free Wellington create a bit of a bow wave. So we've seen quite a lot of appetite at the City Council level to be looking at legislation for compulsory sexing and desexing and chipping of cats. And then our role really is to demonstrate the value of having biodiversity coming back and facilitating the conversations at a community level to say, I'm loving the doctorals, I'm not going to replace my cat. We're seeing far more change, I guess, exerted through social pressures from neighbours than say me turning up with a badge. Dogs, I'm less sure about, sorry. I know that dog ownership's gone up by about 50% post-COVID, hasn't it? Yeah.
The dog issue really concerned me last weekend when I went out to Petone Beach after the Adelaide penguin came in, and I couldn't believe how many dogs were off leash in that area.
One thing that we are going to do, so there's Kiwi aversion training for dogs, and Capital Kiwi doing great work out in the Western Hills through that. There's also korora aversion training for little blue penguins, and I think that's something that we can really look to partner up with and just drive responsible dog ownership and dogs on leads around those areas. We know from Miramar, going visiting that place hundreds, if not thousands of times over the last few years and seeing the amount of dogs off leads there, it's a real issue. So I think drawing it back to what is special, the proliferation of native species, what can I do? Here's something you can do to be a responsible owner, and driving those behaviours at a community level. So if we're out and about, we see someone with their dog off the lead, we say, hey mate, we don't do that stuff anymore. That's not a thing. So I think that's how we'll try and feed into that.
Thank you, Barbie.
Thank you for the presentation. It is interesting, and we're from the Wairarapa, and seeing the predator-free groups that are sprouting up in the urban environment is really exciting. One of the areas that predators are a bit like the old woman who swallowed a fly. You deal with one, and then the other ones grow in numbers. But is there much work being done from the work you're doing, looking at the sterilisation, the science around creating? There's been talk in the possum industry for a long time in that space, but is that being driven forward? Are you guys involved in that, or are you more going down the technology track route? Which is my supplementary question around is, are you getting any pushback on bradifocum resistance in that space?
I'll deal with the first one first. So we're not leading any further advances in the sterilisation gene space, but that is being led at our funders level. So PF 2050 Limited are looking into that. My sense is the technology is still a good decade, if not more, away, let alone the whole public acceptance socialisation process. So there is work being done. There's a lot of good work actually coming out of Australia. So as part of the national movement, we are linked into that. But in terms of being able to see anything on the ground, I think it's a wee ways off yet. Brodifocum, no, we're not. So we need nigh on 100% permissions to be able to deploy the density of devices we need. What I think has really helped with us is the whole idea of saying we want to use toxin to stop using toxin. And so the likes of Miramar, where we can say now that network switched off, we don't need it anymore. It's gone. It's done. As opposed to having it as a background agent the whole time, was really, really key in terms of getting people to support. So that differentiation between elimination, eradication, and ongoing control, I think, was really key for us. Plus, we have about 5 years of operational history under our belt where we haven't maimed children, we haven't killed dogs or cats, and I think that in terms of mana in the community as we progress out has been really, really key.
I only bring it up because when you go up the food chain in terms of predators, deer and goat recovery you can't use unless you prove that you're outside a 2 kilometre
That's right.
radius of, so that meat can't be put into any kind of food chain, pet or human, at all. So that's sort of a stumbling block over deer recovery.
Yeah.
Sitting in that space. So with this Novamide, which you quoted, would that get rid of some of those issues if it was used out there?
Yeah, I believe so. So it's early days. We're working with the developers in that, but there's a lot of, it was actually almost brought to market back in the 60s, and then with the advent of second generation anticoagulants went on the back burner. I think it's been quite a job to get it into a palatable form where rats will engage with it. But the results and the research I've looked at is really, really promising around that just specificity for rats. So, again, it's an opportunity for us to learn and be one of, it's only ourselves and Altea Great Barrier Island that are being targeted to do potential trials, but there's promise, so that's good.
Thank you. So the lineup of people asking questions is Councillor Lee, Ponta, Connolly, Bassett.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you again, James. A real success story with Predator-free Wellington. Do you, and it's probably still a world first in the for capitals. So my 2 questions. The first one is, do you think by proving that impossible is possible is probably one of the best selling points for bringing in others into the predator-free movement?
I absolutely do. I think it's a huge driver for public wanting to get involved. This genuine sense of enablement and therefore leadership that, we don't want to be here forever. Our time is finite, and therefore we want the community to step up as leaders, and seeing how they're responding to that has been absolutely phenomenal. And now that we're through the proof of concept, I think that gives us a lot more to draw on. That's key for motivating others as well. And to see how people have stayed connected. A big fear for us is once the traps fall silent, are we going to lose the volunteers? But some of them might have fallen away, but we have fewer, far more technically proficient volunteers. They're out there kind of thinking we are the kaitiaki now, we are the guardians, and they're rat ninjas looking for any sign, any chews on seeds or whatever. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely blown me away what we're seeing.
And the funding question. Is it correct to say that the funding is essentially to leverage volunteers, and if you monetize volunteers, it's about probably 25 times, $25 for every dollar that's funded?
Yeah, no, the funding is to address that gap in our operating budget, and then to solve a gap in an operating budget, there's multiple ways we can look at it. One is to shrink the requirements of an operating budget. That's the technology piece. One is figuring out how we can grow our workforce. That's the volunteering piece.
Thanks.
Morning. Just in the presentation materials that was attached here, there's a photo of a kariere with a pigeon.
That's right.
Which is all very good. Just wondering whether one of the sort of consequences of this program is that pigeons will be effectively etched out of the city. Is that, I mean, it's not your job to sort of be I suppose, monitoring that, but they are sometimes described as flying rats, and for those who would like to see pigeons gone, is that one of the consequences of having predators where they haven't been previously?
I'm speculating here, so I would say I don't think it would force the entire population of introduced pigeons out, but certainly as wildlife, our native predators such as kariere start to proliferate more, then we will see more incidences of them bringing their own breakfast to people's houses or lunch.
Nice.
It's been quite an interesting, I guess, observation to see how that's being celebrated in the public domain. That photo was taken in, was either Newtown or the suburbs of Mount Victoria, so it's one of our highest engagements we've had in terms of a photo on Facebook for quite a while.
Perfect timing, because my question was actually for Jack, who's just got back. So little off topic, but in the long-term plan, we put aside money for predator-free groups outside of Wellington City, and you've talked about, you know, working with those groups and leveraging your knowledge and know-how. So I'm just wondering, how are you getting on with deploying that money, and how does that feed back into the work that Predator-Free Wellington's doing?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
How about we pick that up when we do the environmental update, and that give everyone some time to check in about the question.
Yeah, but I can certainly also answer how we're working with Predator Free Wellington. I've known James for a very long time, and he's kindly offered their expertise to help support community groups outside the region, particularly with that. You know, how do you really tap into that volunteer resource, create a long-term sustainable trapping group, and some of that real expertise and innovation? And we're pretty keen to take him up on that offer. I think it's a really good opportunity for extending the reach of Predator Free Wellington.
So thank you, because I was going to have a question similar, but to ask about. So, do we have the contacts for all the emerging predator-free groups, or would James have them? Like, how could some of us actually make sure we're connecting with those groups that are within our wards? So, perhaps we can.
I think between the two of us, we could easily, if we don't have them all, then a quick check-in with
David's raising his hand, so it looks like we can all get contacts through David. So that's great, because.
Apologies, I was attempting multitasking, wasn't expecting a question to be.
Come up here, David.
Cheers. I'm very sorry, I was attempting to multitask and wasn't expecting a question coming my way on this topic. So the question was regarding the funds that came through the LTP to support this type of work outside of Wellington City. That's still in a planning phase at this stage of how best we use that fund. To summarize where we're at, we are attempting to distribute it in a few different channels. One being through Wairarapa catchment community relationships that we have. There's definitely a groundswell of landowners in the Wairarapa who are wanting support to do good work on their land. So we're attempting to provide them some resource to do that. Another one is through existing relationships that we have in our pest animals team, which is mainly around providing people the toolkit, literally the materials to do some of this mahi, and the training of how to do it. And combined with that, we're also seeking to manage our information so that these community groups that have the time and energy to do some of this work can direct it in the best places for the best bang for buck. Because at a regional scale, it's high risk that lots of little bits and pieces of this type of work is not all that effective. So there's a lot of work for us to do to really pull this together in a strategic way so that multi-agencies, community groups, etc., are supplementing each other's work. So all of that is sort of coming together this year. We're looking to get the resource in the community's hands to start implementing that this year.
Great, thank you.
I guess that's where the knowledge of Predator Free Wellington is so valuable, right? In terms of, there is a risk that not a lot of money will be spread just too thin and won't do anything. But I think that the strategy that you've developed, I think it's that strategic knowledge that is really valuable as to how we can use that money most effectively beyond Wellington. So just implore everyone to keep talking, but I know you will.
Sure.
Right, thank you. And I now have a couple of new questions from Councillor Duthie and Kirkland. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora, James. Thank you for coming out to speak to Friends of Belmont Regional Park a couple of years back on these very topics of extending the amazing work of Predator-Free Wellington to the wider region. As you move, thinking Wellington City, as you move further west, you get closer and closer to the territory of Capital Kiwi and their project, which is quite a different, a similar but different concept of work. What's the relationship and talk about how to work the synergies of the two projects as you end up getting closer together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the first thing I'd say is we work incredibly closely with Capital Kiwi. So we are doing slightly different things, as you know, and the real tricky piece for us is rats, because rats are at a far higher density than some of these other species. I wouldn't refer to it as the territory of Capital Kiwi. We're all sort of, we're in this together. So we're figuring out the pathway of, again, how do we optimize this piece of work so we're not needing to redo certain things? Are there impacts for Kiwi? When we're not seeing any of those at this stage, which is really good. But we've got a great opportunity in terms of blending our skill sets to get 2 for 1. I think as we start to get further into that Western Territory. We've been really focused in the urban space, understandably, moving through Miramar and further out. But our next phase, where our phase 2 and 3 boundary is, we've got Te Kopaho Reserve. So that's really, it's a delving into a space that's quite similar to the operating environment of Capital Kiwi.
Thank you. James, the Patanui Pest Free Group, their concern's been stoats coming through Transmission Gully, and there seems to be a big increase in that for the last 2 years, or since Transmission Gully's been in place. How does your work integrate with that? Because that's probably relevant to particularly the northern suburbs and the issues there. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one is on a personal note. So I moved from the city up to the Kapiti Coast a year and a half ago, and I guess members of the community started to hear about what it was I did and wanted to spring up a predator-free group in every area, hence Waikanai, Pika Pika, Te Horo and others. But it has been, what I've noticed from that personal lens at a community level, a lot more talk around mustelid, specifically ferrets and stoats. Seems like they had a bumper breeding season last year, really nice and warm, lots and lots of food around. So I see not only the growth out of the city, but almost the reversal in terms of where I lived in the Kapiti Coast, other areas. That's strategically important for the city. So feeding back, how do we stop getting ferrets and stoats into the city? And so your chair and I did a shared news article a while ago to try and shed some light on Transmission Gully, the issues with ferrets in particular. It's resulted in getting some mustelid lines along Transmission Gully and the Kapiti Expressway in partnership with Regional Council. And that, again, run by volunteers to try and reduce numbers and certainly prevent them from getting into the city. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I see it as a critical link. Our work doesn't stop at the city boundaries, The target species don't acknowledge them, right?
So one last question, I'll call it on Councillor Saw, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's always lovely to have good news around our table. And I just want to caveat this with, this may not be in your area of work, but I guess one of the successes of a predator-free environment and the return of our native manu is the need for them to have enough habitat in an urban environment. And I guess that's the second part of strategy, probably something we need to pay attention to. Can you speak a little bit about that and what we might need to be mindful for of that? Because it's all well and good getting rid of the pests, but we need somewhere for the birds to feed.
I love those kind of questions because it's really around how do we prepare ourselves to live with nature. And, some of that is an answer around built environment and things we can do to ensure that there are available habitats. But also this is the link into the broader space with volunteering in the city. We've got really high levels of mobilisation in the communities of Wellington. And you take that example of Miramar, I think Te Motu Kairangi, a restoration group out there, has planted tens of thousands of trees in the last 10 years. The photo of that kakariki is actually on a toitoi planted by Te Motu Kairangi 10 years ago. So, we are starting to see that natural linkage, and there is more that can be done. But within City Council and the reserves here, there's a plan for, I'm going to say 1 million trees, but I think it might even be more. So there's that kind of organisation, institutional response we need to provide the habitat. and people in their own gardens, we're getting asked more and more, what trees should I plant? How do I get a lizard garden happening? And those sorts of things. So it is something that we are acutely aware of and try and feed into where we can, but we haven't stopped running for 7 years either.
I guess that would be an item or a topic that would be good to have a discussion about, is how we that interconnection between those, between restoration and pest eradication, and how we need to be strategic about that, and exactly what you speak about of what are our built environments. Because if people are enjoying the manu around, then that needs to be connected to what kinds of environments are we building and living around, eh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Please, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, James. Thanks everybody for the questions, because that was really interesting. And I'm just thinking about, all the different restoration groups we have in the Kapiti Coast, for example, which there are 24. People love doing something where they can actually see that they're making the difference. So, it's lovely to be on a committee, but it's really even more satisfying to actually be doing something in your own backyard that is making a difference to this amazing goal. So thank you, and thanks very much for coming along and sharing all that, and giving us the opportunity to really dig even further into that. So thank you.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. So what I'm going to do is do the next item, and then we'll have a break. Just so the item number 6, biosecurity. So I've got Matt and Hank. Lovely. Come on up, and I think you're not doing a presentation, is that right? We've got the take it as read, the memorandum of understanding. So if there's is there anything else you want to say, or we could just go into some questions?
Kia ora. Good morning, Hinklo, Principal Advisor Ecosystems. We can take it as read. I might just add it's a bit of good news for us, because we've over many years struggled to have some of these conversations with MPI and DOC, and so to be in a partnership with them is kind of a new space for us to move into. So we're looking forward to having some discussions with them.
I guess a question for me is, knowing that these sort of arrangements take quite a bit of time to lock and load, is that obviously something that was going in place and being discussed before any budget cuts that were,
Yes, that's right. So a lot of this conversation has happened over the last year, maybe a little bit longer. I've been part of Te Urakaika for the last year, and we've been part of the process of feeding into what should go into this MOU and how should it actually work. Nothing of that has really been solidified as this is the actual structure of it. So we kind of need to figure that out as we work through incidents and incursions and those kind of things. So there will still be a lot of sticky points, but at least we've got an open space to have those conversations, and we can escalate through the channels to the right levels within each organization.
I note I used to work at MPI for a very long time, and so I'm aware that Osprey is a Crown entity that reports into MPI, the agency responsible for Osprey. And I just wonder if we can drag Osprey into this this work program, this group. The work of Osprey, whilst they have other motivations for doing the work that they do, it still forms like a massive part of our biosecurity, protection kind of piece. And was it in one of the papers later or somewhere I read around, we're having to, over in Wainui, their work had to be delayed, and now it's not going to happen this year. So the coordination between Osprey and what we do, we still haven't got it nailed, I don't think. And I just wondered if we could use this forum as a place to bring the voice of Osprey and maybe direct their programs a little bit more strategically to align with what the others in this group are trying to achieve.
Yes, most definitely we can have that conversation. We're on a personal or on a regional council level, we have quite good relations with Osprey, and we've got open communication there to see how we can best align our work programs with their work programs. And I believe other regional councils have the same. when it goes that one step higher of actually what does the work program as a whole do, I think that's where Te Ora Kahika can feed into that into the MOU and use that as a way to have better communications and align the work better.
A question from Councillor Kirkbinand.
Henk, excuse my ignorance on this, but does this affect the issue of barnacles on ships coming into Wellington Harbour? Right through New Zealand, there's issues with foreign species that come in and get into our harbours. I forget up in Waikato and Auckland, there's an issue with, I forget the name of the thing that's got into Taupo Lake as well. Does that affect, does it affect that as far as we're concerned?
Yes, so those items are dealt with on a regional scale at the moment, but it's got national implications if it actually moves out. So Te Ora Kahika is the collection of regional councils. So at a biosecurity working group, we discuss this and we feed that into biomanagers. We do work on that. And that's kind of how we escalate this. So yes, it definitely relates to that. You'll see in the paper that putting in a national pathway program for these marine pests have been put aside for this time. There was no interest to put additional levies on boat users to fund that kind of work. And so now we're actually looking at, well, what does it actually mean from an MPI perspective, from Te Ora Kahika? How can we actually work together and to put a national pathway plan forward? We've got time to sit and think about how do we actually roll this out. And so we're actually developing it together rather than it just coming from MPI or it just coming from the regional councils.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. Thanks for the work. So really good to have it being raised around the table. So thank you.
So thank you very much.
So just before we'll go for a break, I might just ask Barbie to mention right now about the Balance Awards that we sponsor, because I think it might be an opportunity, like during morning tea, if anybody wants to get actually some details from you.
Yeah, just the Balanced Farm Environment Awards, we're really struggling for entries this year. I think we're sort of coming up against the fact we're a reasonably small region, and we've been going for 30 years, so we're almost cycling back round asking the same people. It's been a really difficult on-farm year, both from a climate perspective and a financial, and certainly in the sheep and beef industry, they've all just said it's not a year to showcase our industry or our own personal business. So we've hit a lot of brick walls. The dairy guys are feeling a little bit the same, although financially they're probably better off, but they struggled a little bit with cow condition and all those things. So really just putting an appeal out, if anybody here knows of anyone who, and the small businesses like the Stanmore, what I call them the strawberry farm at Te Horo, but they're not, the Stanmore, who were an entrant last year, who do all the propagation for the vineyards and the grapes. They're on country calendar this year. We get leverage out of the Balance Awards. They've just won a Beef and Lamb Award for being a really good community-based organisation. Yet we're struggling to get entrants. And at the moment we've got 2. We need 2 more, and then I'm prepared to run the competition. Because otherwise it doesn't look right, but it'll be really sad to miss another year. So yeah,
Thank
just
you.
appealing to get something out there. I'm not particularly au fait with the Pororua, Ohio Valley area. So whether there's anybody there that has contacts.
Yeah, so I think that's why I thought I'll do it now, and then if anybody wants to catch up with you at morning tea or in the following lunch, now's a good time. So we'll break. We'll do a 15-minute break, so that we'll be back here to kick back into items number 7 and 8 at 11:05. Thank you. Right, okay. Welcome back from morning tea. I think, hopefully Barbie got some wheeling and dealing out of that opportunity. Simon, good work. So welcome back everybody. We'll go on to item number 7. So David's going to introduce this and just tell us if you, welcome David.
Thank you, Councillor Gaylor. I really don't have anything in particular to introduce to this paper other than a quick summary of what it is. It's a story of what's going into park management. And what we're trying to capture here is there's a lot of strands to that, from an operational program, a capital investment program, guided by our strategic document, Toitu Te Whenua, various challenges in community planning. Also of note, there is a hot topic, no pun intended, of fire risk management. The fire risk management update is in the environment group report at the end of that report. In hindsight, I probably should have lumped it into this one so it was all park stuff in one place, but just to clarify that. So there's a lot of content in here. I hope you have some questions that'll lead to good discussion, so I'll hand over there.
Mindful of that it is actually in the next item, but I think I'll kind of perhaps need to give permission if we actually want to do it while you're here at the table and ask questions about that fire risk. That might be the most sensible way to manage it.
Yeah, that seems
so people
fair
just
enough.
know, because normally I'd go, oh, whoa, next item, dude. Yeah, but I won't. Okay, so we've got any questions from anybody? Councillor Conley.
I have a couple of questions actually. I don't quite know what order to cover them off in, but parks spatial planning. You've got some narrative on how that's going in here, but it still seems to be the most excruciatingly slow, lack of progress thing that ever there was. In fact, it seems so slow that it's kind of dropped off the radar altogether. So I'm wondering if we can. I think it's about time. When I say we got real about it, but we did the Toitu Whenua work quite a long time ago in the last triennium, and we've been waiting for this piece of work to kind of functionalise that, and there's been nothing. So what are we doing on that front? 2 other questions from me. You also talk about storytelling in, I've lost it now, in the parks. Can't find it, but yeah, putting some money into telling some of the stories of the parks. We also, there was a promise again that we would do some work on looking at park names. Akatara was one that we'd identified was that actually the correct spelling or the correct name of the park. And again, that's something we've been promised a long time, but nothing has been delivered. And finally, just in terms of asset management, which you put at the front of the report, a criticism that me and Quentin have had in other forums is the fact that our asset management, it really doesn't tell us anything unless we're looking at kind of the criticality of the importance of the assets. And again, we get a picture here of how good the assets are, but we don't know if that is to do with the delivery of fresh water or if that's to do with chair. So again, if we could have a bit more information about the criticality of those assets and how the asset condition sits alongside that, that would be a lot more useful in terms of receiving that info.
Thank you. I'll respond to all 3 of those themes one by one, if that's okay. The spatial planning, also known as master planning, which is common language in the discipline, we've deliberately tried our best to change that rhetoric to spatial planning. Won't go into that any further. So if I say spatial planning, if you're wondering what's that in relation to master planning, it's the same thing. We have definitely made some progress. It has not been forgotten. And the progress we've made recently is mainly at Whareroa Queen Elizabeth Park with Atiawa and Ngāti Toa partners. We have had quite a few hui together in the last year that have been very much in the co-design space. And just recently we've agreed on a reasonably comprehensive scope of what the spatial planning project looks like from start to finish and put some timeframes around that. In our Mana Whenua iwi partner investment packages known as kaupapa funding, we're resourcing that for both Atiawa and Ngāti Toa for them to participate in this mahi with us. So I think, in summary, the spatial planning work at Whareroa is on track and has picked up momentum much more so than it has in the last couple of years. However, there's this comprehensive scope and timeline that I'm referring to does push things out well into 2025. So it's not something that we are promising to have done in the immediate near future. Similar story with the next priority of spatial planning needs at Belmont. The partners, the Ngāti Toa partners we have around the table for the work I mentioned at Whareroa are the same people that we need to work with in the Belmont space. We also have an existing solid relationship with Teranaki Whanui and Roputiaki, who are well aware of our spatial planning needs at Belmont. And the Belmont process is a bit behind Whareroa, but similar feeling of momentum picking up. It all comes down to Mana Whenua capacity and their ability to undertake co-design and participate with us in this mahi as we move forward. One particular stumbling block that we've had is the engagement of outsourced help. We need skilled landscape architectures and communication experts so that we can consolidate this dialogue into public consumable communication in written form and in plans and maps. It's been rather difficult to agree with iwi partners how we go about that outsourcing of help, where the preference is that we hire those skills from within iwi organizations, but the skills often don't exist within iwi organizations, so that pushes the clock back of building and developing those skills in the iwi organization. It's a bit of a pinch point. If I can just offer my view of where to from here and how counselors can help. I believe there's a way that GW can get through this work in a way that's beneficial for our partners if we can operate in a high trust situation where we need to get through a co-design concept as quickly as possible. And the high trust is where Greater Wellington can go and get some of this work done so that we're ready to go through a Reserves Act process, engage the community, describe the plan, etc., and get our iwi partners' fingerprints on it in the right way at the right time without creating the burden on them for their capacity at being the main cause of the pace in which we can progress things. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I think there is a political leadership element of that to help us build the high trust and help us understand how to navigate our way through that so it's mutually helpful for both sides of the partnership.
I guess, though, there have been some issues, like I think of one in particular at Pakuratahi where we had a property that that the leaseholders had stopped leasing, and we were now looking at someone else to lease it, and that the building itself was in really poor condition. Again, that kind of decision, whether we looked to get a new tenant in there, that's the kind of decision that should be informed by the master plans.
Absolutely.
And we're having to do things about face repeatedly because this process has taken so long.
I agree entirely, Councillor Connolly. I think that sits in the why and building the understanding across the partnership of why this is urgent. You're absolutely right. We're in many cases with operations, capital, license, permission requests, we're flying blind in the absence of master plans, spatial plans in place. We're doing the best we can to predict the future and not step on our own toes at some point in the future.
The other two questions were around names and asset management. The asset management, just maybe next time if you bring that back, if we could have a bit more.
Yeah, I'll look into both the te reo naming and the asset management points taken on the asset management, and I think through various business model improvements and spreading and sharing the centers of excellence where we've had good asset management in different parts of the organization that's coming together. And I'm aware of those points that you made, and yeah, appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Kirkbirnand and then Councillor Staples online.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry, Barbie.
Thank you. You mentioned working with Ngāti Toa over at Queen Elizabeth Park, but when we were at Hongieka Marae earlier this year, there seemed to be an issue to do with the surf club there and consultation. Can you comment on that and have those matters been sorted through? Because my understanding was that there was a feeling that there hadn't been full consultation with Ngāti Toa over the issues there. So can you comment where that stands at the moment and what the position is?
Yeah, firstly, I'm not trying to defend the comments, but I'm reluctant to speak on behalf of any Ngāti Toa views about the whenua and the value of the site. So if I seem a bit avoiding some of my explanation, it's because of that, not wanting to speak on behalf of Ngāti Toa. So yes, there was some conflict with the surf club development. I'll go back to why the surf club development was needed in the first place. Part of the Toitū to Whenua process, we identified a 40-meter belt of coastal erosion area throughout the length of Queen Elizabeth Park, and we said all assets, future investments, etc., we need to be shifted back, and we need to come up with a better way for nature-based solutions to deal with the coastal erosion threat. So that meant the previous surf club was in the wrong spot. The surf club went through a standard resource consent process for Reserves Act process, all of the permissions involved in the new footprint of their building. Ngāti Toa was very involved in that consultation. They provided written feedback, quite extensive written feedback in that permission process. I think what came down to the crunch point was two things. I think the disturbance to the land that was described in the documents was accurate, but you didn't get a feel for how significant it was going to be looking at a piece of paper. You got a feel for how significant the disturbance was when you saw the diggers out there and the piles of sand and the earth being moved. And then there was discovery of koiwi more than once, and that was no surprise. The management of that was all very much in line with the consenting protocols of, if there is an accidental discovery, this is the behaviors and process that needs to follow. So that was all done to the letter. But I think there was just a bit of a shock when it actually happened. Just to conclude, the surf club development is carrying on. The earthworks disturbance part of the project is all done. They're now building upwards. So those land disturbance issues that we encountered a few months ago are in the past and hopefully no more.
Well, thank you. That's a good explanation. I know that there was no intent on our part to upset any sensitivities over any issues and that we were trying to meet our obligations everywhere. But sometimes when these things happen, it's good to follow up and just make sure we understand how they came about. So thank you, and thanks for the full comments.
Right, thank you. Councillor Staples, then Barbie, then Councillor Ponta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My question actually encompasses this report, and it's also mentioned in the next one, and this is around the Battle Hill Farm Park. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, when we signed off Toitū to Whenua, we agreed as a council that Battle Hill would remain as a farm park, especially with a view for education for urban people. But I see we're reducing the grazing area from 85 hectares to 34, which I'm sorry is not really a farm. And we are looking for low impact grazing, other uses and other uses of the woolshed, which says to me there's no intention of farming sheep, and sheep are probably one of the lowest impact grazing animals we can have. So I want to know, is this actually a backdoor way of moving away from running Battle Hill as a farm park? And if we are going to do that, shouldn't we have a more overt conversation about it, please? Or less overt?
Thank you, Councillor Staples. The intent is to remain operating Battle Hill as a farm park. We do have challenges with the need to retire land adjacent to waterways. And Toiti Te Whenua has set out an aspirational land use practice of 15-meter setbacks, where regulation requirements are much less than that. So we've tried to compromise in a number of areas, getting to the point of pragmatism where we're seeking to keep those 15-meter setbacks where possible. And in some cases, if it's just not possible, we've encroached on that 15-meter offset buffer. There's also quite a sensitive balance between the park farm operator and the writing for the disabled occupancy and grazing license. I think as a matter of follow-up, I'd suggest we bring that, well, we definitely will be bringing that to council for any approval of what comes out of the expression of interest process. But we do need to consider this carefully, and the reduction of viable productive land in the farm system, I think, does need to be carefully considered. It could also impact on the viability or the interest in a farm operator running their stock on the park, which could lead to future implications of, okay, if we are going to have livestock on the park, there's potentially a future implication in there for council to become stock managers and potentially run the stock ourselves, which is a big shift in the way we're managing it. So all of those issues need to be worked through around this table. We can promise that will happen as we consider the expression of interest feedback from the community.
Okay, thank you.
Barbie. Yeah, thanks, David. I just got a couple of questions. One, is the council fully fire insured for fire risk that's happening in that area, and where does your insurance sit in that space? The other one is just around, there's nothing in this report that I've read around predator control, and where do you sit in terms of the predators that of course are going to start to move in, and we're already talking the ferrets that have found the expressway. There'll be the lovely four-legged larger friends of deer and pigs making their way in there, and goats as well. So but where do you sit? So one's around insurance, and the other around what sort of budgeted items have you got sitting in there in that predator control space, which comes with any kind of plantings?
I will pass on the fire insurance question and get back to you. I don't want to give you any inaccurate information. And in regards to the restoration that follows destocking areas of the parks, that's what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. The main focus of that work at the moment is at Bering Head and Queen Elizabeth Park and Waitangirua Western Belmont Regional Park, where all three of those are at different states of restoration. In fact, actually quite different microclimates. So what we're dealing with varies quite a lot between those three areas as well. So with the destocking of these areas, it definitely increases operational maintenance demands. Fire risk is a big one. Pest management is also a big one. Pest plants, we're battling gorse at QEP in a big way. The next big challenge with restoration following destocking relates to Eastern Belmont Regional Park, where there's over 1,000 hectares applicable to the grazing license at the moment. and that grazing license ends in 2026. Toitu Te Whenua direction is remove livestock grazing. And Councillor Duthie conveniently reminded me that it's not all grazing being removed from Belmont. There is some recreational horse grazing that will remain, so I don't want to aggravate the equestrians. But when I say removing grazing, I'm referring to the livestock, farming livestock. That over 1,000 hectare area is going to be a massive challenge. We're currently in the process of considering the capital investment of fire breaks, etc., and the operational maintenance required for that scale of an undertaking. And alongside that, we're not sure at this stage exactly how we're going to phase the destocking and restoration of that 1,000+ hectares. We're considering options ranging from all at once, i.e. the grazing license ends in 2026 and we tackle it all at once the best we can, or a phasing out of grazing over time in a logical way, taking into consideration fire risk through gullies, recreation opportunity, restoration challenges, etc. So it's a very complex thing we're working through to try to figure out the best long-term option of how we restore 1,000+ hectares and get the livestock off. I suspect it's going to be a long-term journey, i.e. 2 or 3 decades will be the sensible way to phase things out and replace it with restoration mahi.
Thank you. Councillor Saul.
Thank you so much. My question relates to paragraph 34 about the Bearing Head Cottage. Super fantastic. You're really lucky if you got to book in. Sorry for everyone else who's missed out. I was just wanting to pick up on Barbie's question in relation to this around fire risk, and just noting that last summer the park closed for a considerable amount of time. And I'm also aware that the cottage accommodation is managed by a separate company. But I do wonder, with those two things, with the popularity of it being booked out and that we have a tendency to probably close over summer, is it explicitly in the cancellation policy of what will happen if the park is closed for all those bookings, and what is the plan for that, whether people get refunds or is it going to be that they get their reservation postponed? It would be good to have clarity up front on that listing.
Exactly what the cancellation policy says, I can't tell you right now, but we certainly are.
It doesn't explicitly say it.
Okay. I'll look into that and get back to you, but we are certainly expecting that conflict to arise and become a reality. We have already planned a few green fire breaks in the recloaking Papatūānuku restoration work. So we have deliberately, if you look at them on a map at Bearing Head, the planting design looks really strange. It's because of the way wind moves through, and we've done that deliberately for green fire breaks. It'll take some time before those are effective. There's also the big car park out behind the cottage. That is for an emergency safe location. But absolutely, we are expecting that conflict to arise where the reservations people have to use the cottage aren't possible because of fire risk. So we will update the cancellation policy, make it clear,
Yeah, I just think even in the listing as well, that if it just says that this is a potential, I think then everyone goes in all eyes open, particularly because there was a bit of comms issues last time with the park closing and things.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, David. That's awesome. And we'll now move on to the environmental update, which Leanne's going to lead that one.
Kia ora, councillors. Before we open up the environment update for questions, as per normal, I'm going to invite Matt Hickman to come up. He's going to give you a bit of an oral update just on some of the RMA changes that are coming our way, just in case you've got any questions on those.
Thank you, Leanne. Kia ora, councillors. There's quite a lot going on in this space, so I'll try and walk you through some of the key things that are covered in the report and some of the new things that have come through since we wrote the report. So I'll start with Fast Track. we've had the publication of the Fast Track Advisory Group report, and also the projects have been made public. So we've got some indication of what potentially could be coming to our region. Within this report as well, there is also a prioritisation. So there's some indication of how those projects may be staged. The priority ones for our region are Plympton Farm and the State Highway 1 improvements. How it's all rolled out, we'll have to wait and see. We're expecting Select Committee to report back tomorrow, and that will give us some more insights into where the recommendations are landing, and then how the second or third readings may go. So that's Fast Track. RM Bill Amendment 1, so this is covered in paragraph 3 of the update report. We've had Select Committee report back, and I've summarised there some of the key recommendations of what's changed and what hasn't changed. I'll draw your attention to probably two of the bigger ones in terms of bullet point F and bullet point G. So for bullet point F, it appears that they want to exempt evaluation reporting for changes to national direction. So this is MPSs and NESs. And when I come on to the next steps, that probably isn't surprising given the long list of change to national direction that's heading our way. So that step will speed up the next step in terms of the evaluation requirements. Bullet point G wasn't in the original bill. This refers to section 107 in the Act. And this is as a result of, I think it was a Court of Appeal case with Environment Canterbury that potentially caused some problems in terms of the consenting of discharges. So they've done the fix through this particular aspect. There is also another one in relation to section 70 that's coming through as well. That's expected to be fixed in the next round. I'll keep going.
Could you just, I don't understand section G. Yeah, sorry, paragraph G. Could you explain that?
Yep. So in terms of there was a Court of Appeal case with Environment Canterbury, and essentially, I'll paraphrase at a high level. It essentially said that you can no longer consent discharges into degraded water bodies. Full stop. So that poses particular problems in terms of any consenting of any discharges, and it didn't take into account progressive improvement over time. So if you've got a water body that is degraded, and we have quite a few in our region, then in theory you would say, right, there's no more discharges at all if you followed where the court had landed. So what this change does allows you to keep consenting on a progressive improvement base rather than just saying no and turning off the tap. So in our region, that could be stopping all stormwater, for example, going into Porirua Harbour, which we heard about earlier. So the practicality of it wouldn't really work in terms of how it works. So that attempts to make that fix to allow us to do progressive improvement over time. Okay. I'll then move on to National Direction and RM Amendment Bill number 2. So there's a link to this table within the Environment Update Report, which gives quite a good summary of the next steps for RM Bill 2 and the changes to National Direction. In addition to that, we've recently had a letter from the Minister, which hopefully you've all seen a copy of, which does break things down in quite a lot of detail. In particular, it's probably the most detailed we've seen in terms of the appendix of what they intend to do with each instrument. So I would definitely recommend having a really good read of that ministerial letter. It gives a good indication of what's changing where and how. There's a general theme of enabling infrastructure, enabling housing, and lessening the burden on the ag sector. That's the overarching theme for both the Amendment Bill 2 and the changes to MPSs and NESs. When it comes to submission time, we'll probably have to prioritise because there are a lot of changes. So we may just have to focus on the national direction that we see as the most important. So MPSFM, MPSIB, for example, will probably be at the top of the list. And then we'll work through at a workshop with you in terms of what that looks like. I'll pause there. Any questions in terms of RM Bill 2 or national direction? Okay, I'll keep trucking on. And then we have the replacement of the RMA. So there's been some indication as to the direction. So this is covered in paragraph 9 of the update report and also in more detail in the Minister's letter. So the Minister sets out a number of principles for reform within that letter, which again I'd encourage you to read through. Some of it's been signalled before, focus on property rights, 2 acts, which might sound similar to what we had under the previous government. So one a more Environmental Effects Act and one a Spatial Planning Act. So it is reasonably similar. It appears from the wording that they are still sticking to the management of environmental effects. Now you'll remember under the previous government, under the MBEA, that was quite different. The shift was to environmental outcomes. So potentially existing case law will roll over into these new acts, which would be advantageous for us all and for the sector. That was one area of criticism that we did give to the previous government, that you're resetting case law and we're going to be in court for the next 10 years. So that may actually be advantageous. Similar sort of themes in terms of enabling housing infrastructure, renewable energy. From the change from the amendment bill to these new 2 acts won't be a big step change. It's all heading in the same direction. So it won't feel as big a change as we had previously with the MBA and the Spatial Planning Act. This is all consistently moving in the same direction. It looks like there'll be more emphasis on permitted activities, more emphasis on compliance, monitoring, enforcement. So less consenting burden is some of the wording that's in here. Spatial planning is back on the table, which Council have always been supportive of. So that's a good thing. And then we will look at how things like the future development strategy map to that sort of spatial planning. So I'm happy to stop there and happy to take any questions on crystal ball gazing for RMA2.
Councillor Lee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So whether it's this government or any other government, these are only just indications from government. So would it be correct to say that, we are instruments of political policy, but any changes to RMA is like a super tanker, isn't it? It's going to take years. 6 to 10 years before we even see any impact on us. Would that be correct?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. I think there are some indications that they're looking at a faster transition period than the previous government. Under the previous government, the new MBA plans were meant to be written in 10 years. I think that the new combined plans, they're looking at a much shorter time frame, maybe 5 years. And it doesn't appear that they're changing the functions of regional councils or territorials. So it will make it simpler in that sense. So we're all wearing the same hats that we currently are. So I'd imagine it will be quicker. And the changes to the MPSs and NESs will bring a lot of that change forward. And then things like fast track will mean that things will be happening on the ground a lot quicker.
I had a question in terms of, there were to be 3 new pieces of legislation. Now there's indicated to be 2 new pieces of legislation. Well, what's happening to that kind of the area of what that 3rd bill would have been? Is that just null and void? They're not going there? What do you know about that?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of they talk about 3 phases, and that 3rd phase is that replacement of the RMA. And the information we've now got is, and that will be 2 acts. So I think over time, we've now got more information as to what that actually looks like. It looks like the suite of national direction will still stay the same. So we'll have that continuity from the current system and the existing system. But at the moment, we are looking at an Environmental Effects Act and the Spatial Planning Act. And then we've got fast track that sits to the side as well.
So across the board, how are other regional councils dealing with, the uptake or the kind of just sharing of information like what you're bringing to us today? How's that happening across the whole sector?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that we're all in the same boat of trying to get our heads around all of the change that's coming. Through the regional sector, there is a process around combined submissions through all the various SIGs, and then working through what does a strategic submission from the sector look like. So there's live work at the moment in terms of where the sector focuses, and then where councils will focus in terms of the detail, which relates to some of the prioritisation I talked about earlier, that we're going to have to focus on the bits of national direction that are really important for us in terms of a council submission from ourselves.
Have we got a few pieces of work that we'll be submitting to?
There will be a range of submission processes. So each bill will have a select committee. There's a separate process for the national direction. So that's a separate consultation process. And then the RMA, there will be targeted engagement next year, as well as a select committee process. So there are a number of touch points.
So yeah, just Te Ora Kahika are all over this, of course, and they're leading a lot of the work around this. And so, as Matt said, we're kind of feeding into that process through that. And there'll be some things that we'll submit through Te Ora Kahika, and there'll be some things where we might be slightly wanting to go slightly different or wanting to put more emphasis on, in which case we'll put our own submissions on those as well.
Anybody else got any questions about Tamet? Okay, and then thank you. It is I find it hard to kind of keep up with, and yeah, so, but I feel comforted that you're on top of it, right? You're on top of it, right? Okay. Well, then we're good. Matt's on top of it. Okay, Leanne.
We'll keep bringing further updates, obviously, as things progress, because they're progressing quickly. So we'll keep bringing it back to Environment Committee. So just opening up now for any other questions around the wider report.
Councillor Duffy.
Kia ora. A few specific questions, so there might be too specific, I'm not sure. Paragraph 80 about the Seaview oil terminal. So low sulphur fuel oil, I presume that's fuel oil for ships, and there's something new there in terms of its transfer. What were the concerns? It says due to concerns, Maritime New Zealand managed the process rather than us. What's the new thing there? What's the concern? What's the level of environmental risk? What's all that about?
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I'm just trying to work out who might be able to answer this best, whether it's regulation or operations.
Could be followed up since it's quite.
Shall we? Was that okay if we follow up?
Yeah. Most of my colleagues probably don't worry too much about fuel.
It's just the fuel oil.
Yeah. I'll email you later, Jack.
Okay, but it's I'll just say the fuel oil one with Maritime New Zealand comes under the Harbour Master, so I'm happy to talk further about it.
Great. Second question. In relation to paragraph 90, so Councillor Connolly mentioned earlier the 1080 operation delay affected the ability to treat the water catchment area. And there's a question there about how that will relate to next season, because we're expecting a mast. Now, intuitively, it would seem to me that an aerial 1080 operation in a mast area is quite a good thing, because it knocks down rats and stoats as well as the possums that are the original target. So why would they be a trade-off between investing in one versus the other and not a complementary operation next year? He was reading his emails too.
Actually, Hank, if you want to come up to the microphone, just because I'm mindful we have a whole lot of people online, and it's live streamed, so live stream you need to pick it up.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, could I just get the question again? I was reading through the point as you were asking your question.
And I might be misreading the paragraph, but we've had to delay the 1080 operation for the water collection area till next year, and that comes with some funding issues and logistics to work out. We're also expecting a beach mast, which results in an eruption of pests. So is that seen as a trade-off where we might have to choose to deal with one or the other because we don't have enough money to do both, or is that seen as actually that one operation could be usefully knock down the possums for water collection purposes and the rats and stoats for the mast? How do they relate?
I'm not fully across all the details of why it didn't take place, and I believe there was some logistical issues as to why it didn't happen this year. Yes, ideally you would want to combine those things because if one operation deals with both issues, that's I'm not quite sure how that relates further. I'm not sure I'm answering your question quite fully. Is there a possibility just to have a conversation
We can follow
about
up
this,
afterwards,
and
yep.
we can bring it back to committee?
I guessed right that my questions might be too specific. So I'll leave the other third one and follow it up independently too.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll talk to
Cut
your
my losses
people.
while I'm not very far ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's the reality sometimes of, yeah, that's all good. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Saw.
Yes. I just wanted to pick up oh God, I've gone and lost myself somewhere in the depths of diligent. Basically my question's around the ferries and where are we? It is page, oh God. Anyway, it's somewhere in the report. And just wanted to ask whether it needed to be sort of punted up to FRAC to be sort of sufficiently identified as a risk, acknowledging that there's some externalities we have no influence on, but just wanting to kind of signal really clearly where we sit with it. That's all. Especially as we're having more and more increasing issues with the whole fleet of privately owned and publicly owned ferries.
I think Nigel wants to respond.
Yeah, thanks. Look, that's a suggestion we can follow. Are you talking about the ferries sort of running out of power, etc., in the strait? Is that the?
Yeah, I guess essentially on many levels it does become our problem if something goes wrong.
Yeah,
so,
indeed.
Yeah.
So Anthony Delaney and I have both written recently to the Minister of Finance and also the Minister of Transport, indicating some of the challenges that occurs, particularly it becoming kind of our problem, even in a harbour master sense or a centreport shareholding sense. So we have a meeting coming up with Minister Brown on that very issue. And perhaps we could report back to the committee and or FRAC at that point. And the conclusion of this is very much about how we get a different regime for the salvaging / rescuing of vessels should they run out of power or whatever else might happen. So we are very much onto it, and that won't mitigate the risk immediately, but it will certainly bring it into a higher profile. And it's excellent that the Minister's engaging with us.
Right. Councillor Nack.
Thanks, Chair. Just maybe like a process question on this report. Maybe this is not meant as a criticism. Just I think we appreciate the detail in these reports, and I think we want to ask questions about the detail. And so I think if something is to be included in this report, then I think we should be able to get answers, like specific answers to the questions. And if we can't, then maybe don't include that bit in the report. It's a suggestion, right? Because I think there's a possible sense of dissatisfaction that, this is the time when we want to be asking questions about the very detailed elements that have been included in this report that we've scrutinised and thought about. And if we can't actually get those questions because of whatever, then I think that's not satisfactory. Thanks.
Yeah, just acknowledging that point and completely agree. It's much better to have the conversation here. We normally have a number of managers online, and just for availability today, we're just a bit short. So yeah, but noted.
Yeah, because also, mindful of now that we're being live streamed, this is the forum where whoever's watching might well expect, versus any follow-up emails that then aren't public. So, and that's not our intention in the first place. Yeah, so yeah, that's cool. But yeah, the reality is from time to time, it will, resourcing, staffing issues and stuff like that. So if anybody else has got any questions, we're kind of looking to land with the ending of our meeting. So I'm just fiddling with my screen for the karakia. I just want to thank everybody, colleagues around the table, and all the staff from the council today. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone into these reports and the presentations and answering of questions as we could today. I want to particularly acknowledge the public participation today. Just isn't it uplifting to know that there are like-minded young ones out in our community who are doing things, getting up and doing things, and to put the messages out in a different way to reach different communities and parts of our community. So really appreciate the work that they are doing. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today. I'll just say, given the timing that we're finishing now, I think we'll do lunch and be able to resume at 12:30 for the workshop. So mindful that some people are wanting to leave on to another AGM this afternoon. So we've bought ourselves some time and space. So lunch will be through there. So I'll close with the karakia. Kia hora te moreno, kia whakapapa, ponamu te moana. He haurua mā tātou I te rangi nei. Araha atu, araha mai. Tātou ia tātou katoa, huia e, tae ki e. Kia ora, thank you.